Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. Almost forgot. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Timeless. So in this episode, we have the team heading to Hollywood in 1941. It's kind of interesting. Basically, it turns out it's kind of interesting because the agent in this episode was Lucas, played by the actor who played Zoom on season 2 of The Flash. That was pretty cool. I was like, Zoom! Nevertheless, basically, it seems like their entire plan was to steal Citizen Kane, which is kind of interesting. I even appreciate Wyatt being like, I've never seen it. Lucy and like Rufus also shit. They're like, wait, you've never seen it? It's one of those things like you hear just how amazing Citizen Kane is and what it meant for movies, but I've myself have never seen anything of it. But that's kind of like a joke where people go like, yeah, like, oh my god, you haven't seen Citizen Kane? You're just like the dumbest, worst person ever if you haven't. So I don't know. It's one of those things I feel like maybe I should check out. It's just one of those things where I feel like depending on who you are, that might not be a movie that clicks with you. Like it did some impressive stuff back then, but who's to say what it's not going to compare to like a more modern movie. Some people's eyes, maybe it does. That's a whole discussion all in itself. But nevertheless, because basically they want to get inside a column inside of this particular newspaper. Basically, the way Lucy was saying is like, well, it could give them the opportunity to spread whatever propaganda they needed, because it would give them a lot of control even back then. And it's kind of interesting too, because we end up seeing that Lucas was put there a lot younger. He wasn't necessarily a kid. He was most likely like a teenager / young adult. But basically, he lived a life there for 15 years. And even when his dad came back, I was like, hey, it's like, oh, well, when this is all done, maybe I can live here. And maybe you can even come here and live with me, Dad. And decide, no, we got more missions. Like, hey, it was worth a try. So kind of showing you that they are willing and dedicated to this. I mean, that's, like I said, that takes a lot of dedication to live a life. I mean, the dude in the last episode, he was not, like, obviously he had a life of his own. He wasn't really willing to give that up until Emma kind of started threatening him. So it's kind of interesting. I'm curious to see, like, because obviously we saw someone who had their dedication kind of waver because they were living this life for this long. In Lucas's case, it's like, well, I tried, but hey, if I can't, hey, more to the mission. Hey, Nicholas is back. The plan's kind of going through. So showing kind of one who wasn't dedicated and now one who is a lot more dedicated. It's just kind of interesting seeing that balance. I mean, obviously, there's going to be a lot of people within the group. I'm sure, because it's a fanatical group, so I'm sure everyone going forward will probably be even more fanatical now that Nicholas is back. But it also depends on at what point in time they were dropped off in their respective times that they're supposed to kind of like be sleeper agents in, But nevertheless, they met this actress named Hedy Lamarr, which I'm not that familiar with actresses, but it's kind of interesting learning about her because she's actually a super smart lady. Because even Rufus was like, oh man, wow, she's actually, because she's actually not inadvertently, directly, she's connected to the reason why Wi-Fi exists, because she was actually a smart scientist too and everything. I was like, oh man. But sadly, like, because it started with her work on like torpedoes and stuff like that, making it so that they weren't detectable or something like that. Basically, it ultimately led to what would eventually become Wi-Fi, but she never got the credit for it because she let the patents on it lapse, and so she never got any credit for it when the government picked it up later on, and so, which is kind of super sad. But luckily, like, Rufus kind of got her to kind of re-up on it, like make sure to re-up on it later on, and ended up making out like a bandit. Like her and George, her friend, ended up making like starting like a $30 billion company. Like they got like $30 billion from it, and like she quit her job and started her own like tech company and stuff like that. It's like, wow, that's crazy. Now that's a nice twist on history. It's actually kind of sad too, because like George was married at the time, but he obviously had a huge crush on her. But Hetty kind of had a thing for taller dudes, and it's like, oh man, it just doesn't work out. But I do appreciate that. Like I'm not that familiar. Once again, Langston Hughes, exactly who he is, but apparently he's a writer. Like I know, like, it's so dreadful. I'm so uneducated. I do apologize. But, like, Rufus pretending to be him, trying to get meet with that producer and everything. I thought that was kind of a nice little touch. And even she's like, oh, show me. Hetty's like, oh, let me hear some of your poetry. And he's like, all right. And literally sings the opening, the theme song for Fresh Prince, at least a little bit of it. I'm like, what? I was like, no, you didn't do that. And then she's like, oh, that was terrible. It's like, oh yeah, and then it quickly figured out, it's like, I know you're not actually Langston Hughes. And then she ends up helping him because they end up talking about like, oh, this is because Citizen Kane was stolen. And in the end, she kind of like, because she is a super smart lady, she ended up figuring out that, oh yeah, you don't actually work with Orwell either, do you? I do appreciate that moment where it's like, oh yeah, poke a hole in the wall, put some tape on it, and then put the glass up, and you'll be able to hear a lot better. And you have Rufus being like, man, if I didn't have a girlfriend, I'd say you were just like, you're the perfect woman, but I have one, so I'm not going to say that. It's just like, that's so adorable. But, not the only adorable thing about this episode. Finally have Lucy and Wyatt together. It's like, finally. It's like, it took you forever. But I think that moment Lucy had in the episode, which major props to Abigail Spencer for killing it, with that little song she did. And I love that you could tell Lucy was kind of nervous at first, but then she super started getting into it and stuff. I'm like, yeah, like I said, major props to Abigail Spencer for killing that. But then just the little flirtiness between her and, Wyatt. I was like, oh, that's so cute. And it's like, okay, maybe we should just keep this between us. A hard cut to Rufus walking in on him. And he's like, oh, I was looking for guys and here you are together. He's like, I'm just going to leave now. And then he's talking to Wyatt and he's kind of smiling. I was like, so you're a thing now? You're totally a thing now, aren't you? It's like, oh, Wyatt's like, come on, Rufus, be cool. Because he's like, no, I'm cool. I thought that was pretty neat. Then at the same time, we also get them busting Flynn out of prison. That was kind of ingenious. I was like, oh, Agent Christopher's going to help him, stuff like that. It's like, oh, what's going on? It's like, oh, you got something else you got to do? I'm like, oh, of course, using time travel to help you break Flynn out of prison. Of course. I was like, because I figured, how else were you going to do it? It's like, I thought they were going to do something where they were going to like fake his death or something like that. It'd be the easiest way to kind of, I thought that might be what they get him out, but I guess maybe this is kind of the easiest way. But nevertheless, I would assume the person who did come after him would be Rittenhouse. I mean, didn't like, he says it was, but it's like, oh, maybe it's just a random person that killed him. I mean, tried to kill him, but it's like, the timing's a little too perfect. I guess because they feel like, no, like, he is a liability that needs to be taken care of. They probably never bother with him because it's like, well, he's in prison, so we don't have to worry about it. But then it's like, oh, Lucy and the others start tracking him down again. It's like, we got to take him out of play. He might be the one that's feeding them information. Or maybe they had someone on the inside keeping an eye on him. And it's like, oh, he's getting a lot of visitors. Yeah, take him out because he's running his mouth too much. It might be that type of thing. Either way. I am curious to see like I said, because we do know that they can only have 3 people go at a time. So that means we're going to be switching up what the team dynamic is like. So on some mission, somebody's in amongst the group is going to get left behind. So that, like I said, the one that it has to be is either going to be Lucy or Wyatt because Rufus is the pilot and everything. I don't know if they're necessarily going to let Gia do it. I mean, Gia was trained in the piloting, but obviously Rufus is like, well, why bother when Rufus can do it? So not unless something storyline comes up that kind of removes Rufus from doing it. But it's most likely going to be like a switch off between Wyatt and Flynn. So it's like, oh, but never mind. The biggest, like I said, either way, that's one thing. But obviously, Wyatt and Lucy. I was like, but literally in the back of my mind, before it even went down, I was like, yeah, but something's going to come up. Like the whole storyline about Jessica's going to come back and kind of screw this whole thing up. Like something's going to happen. He's going to be given an opportunity to try and save Jessica. So it's not going to work out. And then he gets a text. I'm like, no, it can't be. And Wyatt leaves and I'm like, no. And it's like, Jessica's alive. It's like, wait, what? How? He didn't, what? Is it something they specifically did in the past? Because like there was some changes because like there was that police officer that died. Like I don't know if that would positively affect, like Jessica's life, but it's like not unless this is a byproduct of like the whatever it is that Rittenhouse is doing, like maybe this is a ploy to kind of get Wyatt to kind of back down because his main reason is like, well, we'll kind of do things this way. So it's like, I mean, because that's the only thing I can explain, just for her to suddenly be alive and everything. It's like, because I figured she would only be alive because it'd be like a story relevant thing. And even if she was alive, like even if like my thought has always been, and I even brought it up earlier this season's like, that when it happens, it'd be something that they did. And then eventually, like, even when they try to save her, they can't because of destiny, blah, 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 blah. But it's like, no, she's alive and well. Did not see that twist coming. I'm like, wait, so how is that? Then immediately my brain goes, could it be you're alive and well now because you're actually a planted agent? Because that's the only other explanation I can think of. Like, they went back in time and recruited her because they probably let her know what her future could have been. And so we're rewriting it. Not unless they're messing around, like they screwed around, and she's actually has been a Rittenhouse agent the entire time, that she's actually been bumping around in another time period and they faked her death. Like, you would assume, like, yeah, Wyatt saw her body. Not unless, I mean, they have the resources, have the connections that they do. So who's to say they didn't just fake her death? and then she's actually been a Rittenhouse agent off in time doing whatever, and after all these sudden things, like she's back. Because she has this look on her face when she sees Wyatt. I guess it's more like a situation of like, it is that thing of Wyatt coming back, and it's like, well, obviously they have this whole, it's kind of interesting because they have this whole history like in that time frame of like, because I don't remember how long it was between season 1 and like between then and Jessica's death. It was a good chunk of time, I'm sure. I think, wasn't it like years or something like that? I kind of feel like it was. I don't remember. But nevertheless, so their relationship has continued. I mean, for her to text him out of nowhere like that, so they must have still been good or what. So it severely increases that aspect of like, oh man, that's going to put a wrench in it. Like him and Lucy's like, oh, what are we going to do next? And literally while they're having that conversation, this comes up. His past is literally there. And it's like, because I remember something I talked about too is like Flynn's novel, I mean, not novel, journal that's from Lucy. She had written that the fact is that like Wyatt was so obsessed with Jessica and stuff like that. So I don't, because the context of the conversation, she like the note she had written in the book was more like her and Wyatt couldn't, well, it was more so like, probably from the perspective of like, yeah, Wyatt's main reason for doing all of this is for his wife. Because at the time, I kind of interpreted it as kind of like, well, back during season 1, I kind of interpreted it as kind of like her being like, oh yeah, Wyatt is so fixated on his wife, he's not willing to move forward with me type of thing. I thought that's what it was kind of was, which that could be the interpretation here. It's like, oh yeah, like your wife died, but she's back. But then it's kind of like we were taking that step forward. But I think at the same time, it's a sucky situation because it's like, well, that's his wife. He loves her and everything. This is just him moving on because he thought like, well, he had to, but now she's back, and it's like, what does he do? And it's just, there's no, like, I mean, obviously there's some part of me that's like, nah, be with Lucy. Who cares about Jessica? But at the same time, it's like, that's the woman you love. He even talked about it last season, you know, that story they ended up telling to Bonnie and Clyde last season, pretending like it's Wyatt and Lucy's, but really it was Jessica's and his, that love story about how they, like, how he proposed to her and everything. So it's like, there's love there, but it's like, I want you and Lucy to be together because you were so cute and adorable in this episode. So that's an element we'll just kind of have to wait and see about. And then obviously another big thing this episode is Gia's whole situation. She has not let anyone know anything. Like obviously Rufus knows, but apparently no one else really knew. Well, in particular, Agent Christopher. I don't even know if like Wyatt and Lucy knew. I knew Mason. It seems like Mason knew, but no, like I'm curious, did Wyatt and Lucy know about Gia's situation either? And it seems like, obviously you can tell Gia's reasoning for it. It's kind of like, it's a combination of like, well, she's scared. Plus she talked about the fact is that she didn't want to be a hindrance. She didn't know what it meant for her or being her part of the team. It's like, oh, she might be kicked off because she might be too into issue, which Christopher's like, no, you're part of this team. No one on this team is expendable, but we need to check up on your health and everything. But she kind of explains why too. It's that situation of like, well, her dad went to the doctor. It ended up with back pains. It turned into something else. And then a couple months later, he's dead. And it's just like, if there's any, like, it's one of those things that like, if I don't know about it, then maybe, you know, it's not a problem. It'll become a problem the moment I know it's a thing. So like I said, it's kind of interesting. But then we end up finding out from Mason, it's like, oh no, actually this situation has come up before. Cause I was like, why is he being so like, contrarian to this whole situation? Is like, I would think you would be concerned about her health and everything, because he's like siding with Gia. It's like, no, she doesn't need to see a doctor. It's because there have been 2 people in the past who've had a similar situation to Gia. One died from brain aneurysm, and the other one died from, well, not dead, is currently struggling, dealing with schizophrenia. So it kind of broke their minds, which you can kind of tell, like with everything that's going on, because Gia hasn't explained to anyone what it is exactly that she's seeing. Because I guess for one, it's because she doesn't understand, but 2 is also because I think she doesn't want anyone looking at her like she's a weirdo or a freak. It's just like, she just wants to try and do what she needs to do, just kind of be normal and to be happy about it. So there's that. But, there's an interesting thing. The thing she saw this episode, spoiler alerts, it's connected to next episode, because next week's episode, it deals with the Salem witch trial. I just happened to catch a glimpse of it, and I think that's what, like, literally the title of the episode is that. Well, not next week's episode, the week after next, but I'll get to that soon enough. But the next episode, so, because he was wearing, like, outfits you see from, like, pilgrims or, like, Salem witch clothes. So I would assume that's like the next episode, but maybe that's from something else. But she saw him killing, and it seems like it's interesting too, because so far, I mean, at least for now, so far all her visions are connected to Rufus specifically. Maybe it's just because there's a connection between them. Maybe it's because like the person that kind of preoccupies the most part of her brain, like maybe the visions are kind of adapting to that, maybe it's just because of her own, like the person she cares about the most and is most worried about. Maybe that's why the visions are tailored to him. Maybe in the future they could be tailored to other people, but for now they're all tailored to Rufus, or maybe they'll always stay tailored to Rufus. Who knows? It might be part of some grand plan because like Rufus needs to be kind of like guarded even more or something like it's something like that, but I don't know. But what ends up interestingly turning out to be is the fact is she's actually even in even better health because of this situation. And even Mason's kind of like, wait, what? Because the other people, like one had a brain aneurysm and the other one had schizophrenia. But it's like she even talked about having a heart murmur that's going to. So it's like, what the hell is up with that? So this whole thing isn't killing her. I mean, maybe it still is, but it's not showing. So it's like, what does that mean? Is she turning into like a superhero in some shape or form? I would assume. Like I said, we do know that she, with everything that's kind of shown now, she does seem like she is being able to see the future. But like I said, it doesn't even seem like she's told even Rufus what it is exactly that she sees. Because when she was, like, when they were talking about it, it seems like they didn't know. So even, like, what she saw at the end of season 1, she was like, oh yeah, she talked about, like, the seizures and stuff like that. But it's like, she never talked about exactly what she saw at the end of season 1 when she first had her attack, seizure. So it's such an interesting development. So it's like, I'm curious to see, will that develop in any other shape or form besides divisions? I mean, if there's like no medical problem for him, like for her to even be even in better health is kind of, like I said, that kind of took me by surprise. I was thinking like, oh man, like the more and more this happens, like she'll get visions of the future, will help out and everything, but it will, be killing her. I mean, it could still be slowly killing her anyway. I still feel like there's no way you can gain something like that without there being ramifications for it. But like I said, that's something we'll just kind of have to wait and see what happens, beyond that. So I'm very curious to see where like all of this takes us in the next episode. And as I was bringing up earlier, there is no episode next week. There will be one the week after next on the 8th. So do keep that in mind. But really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.